the world.
Yep.
Good.
Hello, Mr. Peter.
Let me turn on the camera. There we go.
Peter, where's that suit?
Hang on.
You're wearing that suit in your picture. Where's that suit?
Yeah, one second. Something went wrong with Zoom. It's thinking that my shirt is the green screen. One moment till I fix that. My shirt is definitely not a green.
Frodo, I'm leaving at 9:30 to get to the lab by 10, so I'm only here 30 minutes today.
Okay. Let me share a link with you then. This is what I hope to. We're going to be mostly talking about the whole LLMs things today, but I'll put this in the chat. So,
Peter, you look kind of
Why
weird.
is it doing that?
Stop that.
he's an
Stop that.
Orangeman. What do you expect? Weird is all you're going to get. Right. Yeah. Dean, if you can have a brief look at this page, because then you can see it on your size and screen and all that. By the way, when I was working this morning in town in a really, really, really nice coffee shop, I was working in my headset. And it was an interesting discussion with the manager there. It all seems very normal now, but there's still some fascination. Yeah, that's you are basically a library, Peter, but we knew that already.
All right.
There's Mark. Mark, dear. Mark, darling, how are you? I miss you. Let's do a conference.
I do apologize. I've been on my back with. Well, I know it better not be flu. I paid to have a jab to not have flu, but anyway, I've been rather under the weather, so I apologize. And funny enough, the thing that I have just stopped doing is I'm most of the way through with everything backing up. I'm most of the way through your Sloan thing. So if it's too late, it's too late. But if it's not, I had some comments. I tried to read it from the view of the sort of person who I took your point on board. So I'm not necessarily reflecting my view. I'm thinking how someone who doesn't necessarily get this might.
Mark, anything you say is going to be helpful because I love you're always so careful with your comments. So thank you. Bless you.
No, that's all right. And I do apologize. I know last week we rather disappeared, roared off on a complete tangent when we were supposed to be talking about the document. But that's the nature of these talks.
We're going to be finished tomorrow. We plan to get things turned.
I know. I'll do it. I will do it when we finish today. I'll do that, and I'll put it on the wire to you and Fred.
We're moving pretty quickly, and it looks like we'll make an early deadline. And then I can work on the NEH grant.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, the gist of a lot of it is I think I know what you're saying, but I don't think it's said on the page.
Okay, thank you.
And that's always the way with drafting. And so it's not a critique; it's that thing that actually I find useful when people do it for me. Is okay, it's in here, but it's not actually on the page. And I think there are one or two bits of that because I mean. Most of it I actually, like, and anyway, well, I know it's provenance, so I hardly like to be a Guinness.
I've changed a few things on the cover page. because Deanie and I have gone through, so everything is 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So
Sure.
1 is always dialogue, 2 is always software, 3 is always metadata.
Okay. Yeah.
Just the cover page is maximum this. So what
Okay.
I tried to clean up this bit by making it less wordy, even though it's the biggest one. And a really key thing that has struck me, let's not spend too much time on that specific, but struck me is that we can talk and philosophize and be do-gooders as much as we want, but if we don't actually build a better system, we've lost.
Yeah. And I tried to channel in this. I think the thing I've taken as my sort of conduit in this is just how enthusiastic Vint is about this, by which I mean that he is not enthusiastic, but he's not, he's not exactly jumping up and down about it. And I think that's probably where the reviewers will be, because so the point is, they don't have to be excited about it. And the danger is, if one's too excited about it, it puts people off, because this is not this is something where emotion and excitement doesn't sell.
Well, academics can't be excited about their research.
Well, I mean, no, they ought to be able to. But I mean, but Dini, you're absolutely right. Somebody who's probably north of my age and knows a lot of stuff and has been around, but they're not. We're not asking for likes. We're asking for money.
Mark, it's really funny. I just finished reading an article this morning in the Chronicle of Higher Education that to help students learn better, we need to be excited about our research and our teaching of our research in our classroom, and show passion. Ironically, and also the article says, and it helps us personally feel better.
I've had as soon
as we do that, we're slapped around for being too Pollyannish or too sweet or too nice or too excited about our work, and it's this weird, I think, psychotic.
Well, I must say, I'm sitting on my passion heavily at the moment, and the thing I've also been doing this week is my role as formats chair for Hypertext next year, because
yay.
my sheer rage is becoming harder and harder to contain. And just when I thought the ACM couldn't get worse, I thought, oh, look at the IEEE, they ought to know what they're doing, and it's no better. It's just mess all the way down. Basically, people wrote stuff in the early 90s, at the early dawn of tech, and just have never gone back and updated anything.
Well, all you can do is go to one CGRAPH conference, Mark, and you can see it in the flesh. It's so boring.
But it's good, and I've been talking with Gabo, who is at Hypertext, about possibly doing some experiments with his system and things there, and talking with Alessio and Dave. So there's some interesting stuff. And fun enough, this all relates around, because the nexus of the stuff I just mentioned here is, if I had to summarize this week, is we need a better format for referencing. We need to stop dicking around and make a format that is machine centric, and stop dicking around with print formats. That's a render problem. That is not how you manage it. There you go. So I'll shut up now, because now I've managed to externalize this.
I'm knocking on the table, Mark. Good morning, Fabienne. How are you? Bonjour.
Bonjour.
Bonsoir.
How are you doing? Yes.
Bonjour.
It's starting to get dark and cold, but it's okay.
Yeah, here too. Well, today we're having a beautiful day. Our Halloween is tomorrow. Tonight we have a War of the Worlds performance at the local theater that John, my husband, is putting on. So we're all getting excited about tonight's performance, and the weather's holding, so we might have a good crowd tonight, which is good.
That's very cool. So guys, today the main thing we have on the agenda is to talk about LLMs and all of that nerdy stuff, which is great. Before that, a little bit of almost practical stuff, a little bit of an update from Deanie and me, just really briefly. First, I'll show you, this is partly with what you were saying, Mark. So this is the letter of support from Vint. So sorry, I'll just leave it like that.
The Slode Foundation. Line 2.
Yeah. So strongly encourage, it is, it's nice. Just got this in a
I'd
short while.
love to have that for my own record, to have Vince Cerf saying nice things about me.
Yeah.
Never thought that would happen in my whole life. It's always a nice thing.
So this is Ismail. I strongly support this proposal. And then really briefly, specifically for you, Fabienne, or mostly for you, the thing that I just said before you logged in now is, having gone through all these things, it is very, very clear to me that if we don't actually make a system, a tool someone can use, that is better than anything else for that audience, for a small feature set, but for that, this is, pardon my French, academic. Right? It's nothing wrong with academic stuff too, but we can't just tell Apple and Meta and everybody to use a standard or to be open. We have to do it. That just seems obvious. And that's a cause for huge stress, at least for me. So we got to deliver something. So I'm not asking you guys to read this, but I just want to show you, so we're on the same virtual page. For the very, very beginning, I want to build a Vision OS app because I think the experience will be useful. It'll be the most minimal thing, but it'll be reader on Vision, right? And then exactly the same for the WebXR. I put grant funded here, but I'm wondering, and Fabienne, because of your experience with WebXR, if we could have a separate talk on exactly what we can do reasonably, because having the Mac version of Reader done and polished as it is now is probably the greatest portfolio piece we have for this software. You know, they can read all our things, but they try Reader and it works and people like it. It does something different, right? That's why I'm wondering if we can have the beginning of the WebXR started. It'll make them really understand that this is not just someone wanting money so they can sit around and code, so to speak. And this is the whole document. And I just want to give you an idea. In the future, we can do all kinds of cool stuff when we have tons of money. But even now, right? How to turn the page is actually an interesting thing, especially in the Apple system, because they are very much about the pinching and all of that stuff. So I look forward to, Fabienne, how you think that should be in XR. And also the idea of, as you know, for our book now, you can either go to the next page or the next section, the next article, which I found is the quickest, easiest way for me to get an overview of our document. How do you do that in XR? How do you do a double click? Or is it not even a double click? What is the gesture for that? So I'm hoping we can do some of these things so we can start experimenting with that. I just wanted to lay that on the table. And this is the link I sent you.
I'm working on that right now in my class for Rob Sweigert's VR game, right? So we have these panels, because if you play the real game, it has all these databases that you access, and you know, point and click in the original game, but now on DOS, it's using the keys, which is just terrible. In this VR environment, we have 12 panels that are hovering in front of you, right? You have no desk. It's all hard light, as we're calling it. These panels are hard light panels. You take one, we're taking one by the hand and pulling it towards you. And as you pull it towards you, the whole text becomes alive, right? So all you see at the beginning is the headline. You pull it towards you and you see the text, and all the other panels recede and go dark, right? You read through it. Some of them are very short, so you don't need to do any scrolling, but we're going to be using the hand like this. So not fingers, but more like touching with your hands, right? Once you finish reading it, you pull it back into the space in front of you and all the panels come alive again. So there's a lot of things we're doing in that class that I'll document for us that I think will be useful to think about. We're also trying to avoid anything that has to do with paper, which is what I think Apple did in the original, right? They were swiping instead of turning a page. They were pinching instead of turning the corner of a page. They were doing all these kinds of things. Where can we go next? So just to repeat, there is no desk when you are placed to put things in front of you. You're standing in front of a console that does not exist. It only comes alive when you evoke it, and it's only hard light. There's holographic images, but also hard light images simultaneously. So there's a lot of things we're trying to work through as we're imagining the 25th century and beyond.
Yeah, yes. I don't agree with all of that for reading, but I do agree with it for a game, or game or that kind of poetry, absolutely. And I look forward to us dealing with that. I do think it is nice to have a desk. I think having the room is going to be really, really important. When I was today in Lavazza Coffee and working with my Quest Pro, I was leaning on the desk and typing on the physical table. So the placement of the document was within kind of arm's reach rather than on a wall. With these other discussions, we need to build a system so we can have the discussions around. This is where we need to have ideas be able to fight. And it's just crazy how many options and opportunities there are for even just this. Mark, yeah.
Very well. First thing, very quickly from the page just put down. I know this will cause comment, but I'm not convinced that using the term PDF as opposed to just document in that article is actually useful. The fact that most of what we might be doing in the first case is PDF because it has the unfortunate effect of also implying that other stuff is not relevant. And one of the things actually we're trying to do is to escape much of the prison that the PDF forces upon us. So but again, it's not about the format. But if unwittingly, just as a throwaway phrase, one mentions a format, it unwittingly also implies that other formats not so good. So I would just call it a document anyway.
It's not unwitting. It is wittingly done. It is done on purpose. The document sent into the Sloan on the cover page does not mention PDF, but it does mention it further in. And the reason I'm mentioning it is because this is for coding. It's a tiny amount of money and it's a tiny amount of time. So if we treat, but I'm on your side of this, and Fabienne and I have arm wrestled on this many times. We need to have a completely interactive environment. But for the beginning, if these are almost like JPEGs, but you can do the basic interactions, I think that is a huge win. So that's why I'm being very careful limiting what we promise.
Okay. And the reason I actually set my hand up, I was going to say, one of the things I really liked in Dini's description just now, it may not be everyone's style. I really like this idea that you take something, you pull it towards you. So when you interact with it, it becomes more interactive. Otherwise, the object in the space stands proxy for what it will be or may be. Because one of the things this is something I keep coming across from sort of helping the people in the Tinderbox community, where people are trying to draw all the text on screen and then wondering why they can't understand anything. A lot of people, it's because, and we all differ like this, but it's clear that for some people, unless they can see it, it doesn't exist. So there's a challenge there. But I do think this idea of creating this sort of threshold where, okay, this is now the active thing. The affordances now become more apparent. Because otherwise, if everything has all the affordances all the time, actually you get a sort of overload. Fine for the expert, not so good for the novice.
Also, once again, the fear is that if there's too much color, too much light, too much stuff happening, you'll be overwhelmed. So all of it is in very soft, kind of light. As you pull the one towards you, that becomes the activated one, right? There's also sound. So there's ambient sound in the background. There's going to be headlines that are read, a lot of sonic. So the goal of Frota for the game, which is different for just everyday use, is we want people to interact and physically move in the space so that it's not just reading text. Games are not about just reading text. It's very different than real life experience. So it's not an office application, it's a game application. But there are some details we're working out with this project that are applicable to what you and I are doing. And that's what I'm talking about. Yeah. And the hard light, I think, is the real interesting part of it, and how we're doing, how we're showing text.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is really, really important to do things that we disagree about in the community. It's because it helps us understand our own thoughts more. So I'm very, very grateful for that. Some of it is directly applicable, no question. But even saying something that's slightly different helps us understand. Yeah, Fabienne.
So to me, it all makes sense. The thing is that I've never worked with Sloan, and I don't know how, let's say, strict they are, meaning that if at some point you say PDF, they understand PDF, not document. So that's yeah, which is sometimes you can get stuck in a corner this way.
Yeah, but-
meaning that you go and you implement whatever you promised, even if it's not interesting, because the person who accepted, let's say, to give the grant is like, that's our specs, let's say. Yeah.
Sloan, we got to them in a personal way. So I may have misunderstood, but to my understanding, their track for funding is improving academic communication. That is a key reason to stick with PDFs for now. Of course, I hope they can parse visual meta. You know, I'm all about that. And, you know, once we got these rectangles moving in a comfortable way and viewing more pages, fewer pages, there's absolutely no question that we need to go over to more flowing text and different views. That's not up for discussion. We're completely on the same page. But what really actually scares me is having somebody, an academic student or whatever, put on the headset, try our system in a year or two, and feel, yeah, that's kind of neat. It has to be, oh, here I can see more, here I can do more with the data that I have right now. It has to be.
To put this in perspective, back when I was using an IBM from 1982 until I got my first Macintosh, it was so convoluted to work with anything simple. I mean, even mail merge was a pain in the butt, right? And I was using WordStar, which was the worst goddamn program in the universe. Excuse my language. I touched my finger in 1984. One of my friends got a Macintosh, and I began typing, right? Typing on this Macintosh, realizing that when I hit G, I got G. When I capitalized Shift G, I capitalized G. I didn't have to do all this rigmarole that I had to do with WordStar to make it work. That was absolutely fantastic. And it changed the way I interacted with the computer. And I bought a Macintosh as soon as I could, about a year and a half later. So, and I haven't turned my back on it since. So I've been in the Mac house forever. But it is that kind of, oh my God. Oh my God, that's what we want. The oh my God. Fabienne, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No worries. So I think to get the oh my God moment, if we get specification or promise for the grant that are extremely down to earth, let's say opening a PDF and flipping pages without enough wiggle room to actually, because that's an assumption. And I think to me, that's what's interesting in prototyping is you need to challenge the assumptions, but you need to have enough wiggle room to say, okay, the assumption was wrong. For example, maybe we don't want to literally flip pages. Maybe we want, I don't know, to dance the page away. I have literally no idea. I'm saying something a bit provocative just because, if it's literally flipping the page, I would be surprised if there is a wow moment because it would be basically too literal. Maybe it would be a lot more efficient. I don't know. But yeah, my point being the formulation has to be clear enough so that the person reading it understands, but vague enough so that there is enough wiggle room to narrow down what we don't know yet would be, let's say, a wow moment.
I mean, this is the, that's not right. This one here. This is the first page. It doesn't say PDF. Right? Way down when we're talking about all kinds of things when it comes to what are we actually going to build. And again, this is just for the first year. And as we all know in our community, a year goes pretty quickly. So, you know, please just understand that I have the responsibility to deliver. And I am extremely bad at being focused on one thing. I'm the one who goes everywhere. So this discussion is kind of funny, the way it's polarized us. So I'm just saying, let's do little things and then we do bigger things. Yeah, Mark?
Just to say, because I think I inadvertently, well, I didn't think I had, but I managed to cross-thread two things. I was actually commenting about the stuff on the future of text site. I wasn't talking about the Sloan thing. I was just looking at that, and to my mind, they're two separate things, but broadly the same challenge applies. And I've got another comment, but it's a different thing. So go ahead, Dini.
Oh no, she had to go.
I see.
She had to leave at 12:30. So that's fine. Right. Okay. How do we contact Alan? He's supposed to be here, for crying out loud. Just Twitter. I am listening to you, Mark. I just want to.
Okay. No, the salt mine I've been in this week, looking at academic referencing stuff at ACM and elsewhere, has actually been quite instructive. And I keep coming back to one of Ted Nelson's comments, which admittedly he was really saying, he was talking about something else, but his point about it's not WYSIWYG, it's WYSIWAG. And
That's
for all the
term, not a TED
for all
term.
the wonder that what you see is all you get. Sorry, if you're not familiar with the original quote.
Oh, no, I'm just saying it's a Doug term, not a TED term.
Oh, I do apologize. My memory has failed me, not for the first time.
That's okay.
Well, in front of the wrong crowd. Yeah, because I sort of totally echo sort of Dini's comment about the magic of being able to sort of just do something and things appearing. But it's dragged us off into this ghetto of digital paper.
No, it
our
hasn't.
world has moved away from that. And
Mark, no, it hasn't. We go through this discussion so often about digital paper or not. Please remember, this is a tiny project. If we go in now and
I'm not talking about this project. Sorry, I'm making a general point, which is very pertinent to the problem of improving academic discourse. Because, in fact, I replied to your email, Peter, and you know, amongst other things, I've been doing some experiments about, you know, basically whether you can take the only representation we have of papers and make anything useful of them. And it turns out you can't. They're an absolute mess. It doesn't matter whether you try and get HTML out or whether you try and get plain text out. It's just full of CRAP. And we should be doing better than that. And part of the problem, the root cause of that, is we start by fixing something into a paper metaphor instead of making the paper metaphor the render of record of the underlying information. It's a subtle point, but now we're more fully in a digital age, and when we think about things like XR, the time has definitely come when we need to just step up to the mark and be honest about the degree to which we're enthralled to technology we are no longer so reliant on, and to accept how it's actually an impediment to us doing better things.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, that is no critique. This is not, this just runs across the piece.
Right. I agree with that, Mark, very much. But also, there is another element that I think is really, really important, and that is, for me personally, I've gone in this particular thing over the many, many years. I've gone from talking to people over coffee, right, to now, hi, Leon. We're gonna. I just got a message from Alan. He's coming in a minute, so we can go into the LLMs properly. We're just doing a little bit of a discussion. So the thing about the hopefully, if we now get this Sloan thing, it is just the beginning of something. And the only way it can be the beginning and not a one-off is we deliver. I know this is obvious. I just want to highlight my perspective. I'm not preaching or talking down to you. Just talking about my concerns, my worry, my stress over this, right?
Sure.
So that is why, even on that little document, I'll share it again now that Leon is here, because we could talk about that at some other point or offline. But the point is, just the act of having a PDF, which is the most normal, boring thing possible, but it is the academic standard. Just having that, first of all, open in VR takes a bit of work, but that's something I know is solvable. Both Leon and Fabian has talked about that. But then the thing is, once it's in there, even the basic reading, is it double page, single page? How do you center it on your desk? The way we do it with the Quest right now is quite clunky. The way I think we do it in the Vision, as far as I've been able to find out today, you don't have a free space. It's in a frame, which is very odd, right? And then there's the question of how do you invoke the commands to go from page to page or from section to section. These interactions will require a lot of testing. How we then deal with the references, there is so much there that if we just keep the document as simple as possible in the beginning, hopefully we can learn something and say, okay, we've done this. PDFs are great for what they are. Now, can we liberate it? I mean, we've talked, unfortunately, you couldn't join us last week, but we talked again about Brandl's Magic Carpets. You know, we had the dialogue and all that. There's no question we need to do that. There's no question we need to go into proper 3D sculptures of knowledge. There's no questions about that. I am just, for the record, shit scared of fucking up. Promise a little and deliver it in a polished way. That is all. And in terms of what it means, you know, we have tried to write that in the document, you know, why and why now and why us. And we have very, very strong endorsements from the right people. So I'm not too worried about that aspect of it now. What I am worried about is you feeding me more crack cocaine, because I want to keep changing things. I want to do what you're talking about, Mark. I just don't dare do it.
Mm.
You know, that's all. We're on the same page, just not the same year. Let's give it a year.
Yeah. Well, interesting to note that actually, funny enough, it was a comment by Brandel that actually was another thing that sort of, set off some of the work I was alluding to earlier, because he emailed, said, oh, by the way, I've been meaning to read your paper. He said, the truth is, I just can't read it in 2-column format, but I can't reformat it. And I said, well, yes. And then spent 3 days trying to get a usable text. He said, why can't I just lie in bed, read it at a comfortable size on a virtual screen when I'm lying on the floor? And I thought, that is such a reasonable thing. And the only reason we can't do it is because we can't get at the original text. I've gone as far as actually getting some PDF tools and actually looking into that. And that's absolutely the case. There is not. If you sort of open up the box and look inside, there isn't a sheet, a sort of digital sheet with the text on it. What you've got is just a whole lot of snippets of PostScript. And it would appear that actually when you say copy text off the screen, the Reader app, be it your app or Acrobat Reader or Foxit or one of the many millions of apps that do this, takes on the job of actually reassembling the text from the PostScript. Dear God, I had no idea it was that steam age. I mean, it's insanity. It's not something you would ever have designed to do. The other interesting thing that
you are really singing an entire chorus to the chorus here. We all agree with you, okay? And in fact, I have spent years on this. I have a command in Reader even. You select the text, you do spacebar, and it formats it like this. This is on purpose breaking on comma. It's an experiment. Unfortunately, some of the ligatures come across as question marks. You know, it is something worth looking at. It is actually possible to get something readable out of this. In fact,
one of the
just
things,
a paragraph, it's a lot better.
One of the things that people always choose to elide over is, and it's especially bad with 2-column format, is the amount of damage done by soft hyphenation, because the reader, that there's nothing in the LaTeX, there's nothing in the PostScript that marks a soft hyphenation, which the reader should remove. So when it reassembles the text, it removes the hyphen space.
Mark, everybody agrees on this.
Well, I'm not sure they do. Well, what I'm saying is people don't reflect it. I mean, we're not making any change. We're not making any progress because we keep saying it's too difficult and we should do it later.
Okay.
And that, the reason I'm devoting a lot of completely unfunded time and work to just try and help just one particular academic conference is that I'm just fed up with waiting. It's too late already. We need to move forward.
I agree with you there as well. And we have a problem with over 200 citations in author. When they're exported to Visual Meta, they break. So we have an index to help deal with that, where we literally spell things out. We're doing the same for endnotes. I agree. But the thing is, you and I are, in this sense, almost nobodies. You're slightly less nobody than me because you actually have a degree. So we can do something. But, I've been in touch with the ACM, the president of the ACM, the head of the digital library, presented to the digital library. Vint Cerf has sent them several emails explaining, different approaches. They are basically, half of them saying PDFs are fine. The other half is saying we need to move to something entirely new. And when we ask them what, they say, sorry, right? So we have to build our credentials. Building our credentials is part of what this whole thing is about.
Can I quickly share something on screen for you, which is a little thing that I rediscovered quite by accident. If you submit a paper to the ACM using their so-called TAP system, which is the ACM, well, I can't remember say it. Anyway, it's called TAPS for short, TAPS. When you get through to the final bit where it gives you the document that you now submit with all the copyright and all that stuff in it, it gives you two things: a PDF and bear with me a second. Share screen. Which one do I want? I want this one. It gives you, lo and behold, an HTML page. It's HTML 4.0, so it looks to have been an abandoned experiment, because the only way you can get this is if you're live in the TAP system. And I had the presence of mind in 2022 to save out this info, which is why I have this one. But just to make the point, whereas if you take anything else, if you take any other method of getting text to HTML out of a sort of PDF, you generally will end up with a complete pot mess of little snippets of text with sort of 1990s style font tags around everything. Well, I mean, they use span, but it's basically early 1990s style HTML. Whereas what you can see here is actually quite clear HTML. So we can do it. It's clearly, someone didn't put enough money in the right donation box, I guess. I'm sorry. I'll stop sharing. But anyway, so it can be done. And funnily enough, it's been done for some years. It's just they don't want us to know.
They did have an experiment with HTML. That is correct. And from their internal database system, they can export in multiple formats. Absolutely. It isn't even that hard. Right? This is very much a human engineering problem, so to speak. But yeah, right. So yeah, I guess Alan is still dealing with his dog. What's happening there? But did you guys see the email from Bob? He sent it to some of us, a bit random. I will give you the link here. It's very relevant to what we're moving into now. 1 second. It's about reading a book by giving the book to an LLM and interrogating it. It's an interesting premise, isn't it?
Can you summarize it for us? Because it's quite long, no?
Ah, what am I?
If you already have read it?
What am I, your chatbot? I think that's basically the whole point, using a chatbot to interrogate a book. What is this book about? Why do they say that? And so on. So that is basically the summary. Mark?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's like Curate saying, good in parts, in that one of the big problems, I keep seeing in so many forms at the moment, is that we generally as people find it really, really hard to understand that using the current AI to do things like summary is incredibly useful and informative. Then just assuming that by asking a question, we will get a definitive answer is, yeah, outside very distinct cases, is not so sure. And it seems to be causing a lot of confusion. And it's a shame, actually, the AI community, I mean, should be mature enough now to be able to drawing a distinction I think it would help them if they stopped overselling the product so much, and emphasize what it's good at. Because certainly, I think summary and extraction is good, but there's also a danger in that you're assuming that the summary is because it's actually understood what was in the corpus, and I haven't seen any research yet where people have actually sort of basically gone and reviewed the quality of the output.
That's what this is, this article, basically. It's basically a review of that process. So it's kind of interesting like that. And I'm most certainly not saying people should generally just read books in that way, but you know, it was funny that Leon asked me to do a summary, and that's kind of what it does. I think it is worthwhile as yet one means through which to skim a book. Is it going to be right all the time? Probably not. So Fabian, I'm going to put you on the spot while we're waiting for Alan here. Leon has very kindly agreed to help me a little bit to learn a little bit of Blender. And apparently there's also some Adobe thing that I should look into. Some 3D stuff. Fabian, I'm now ready to learn a little bit about WebXR coding. And I think I could be a useful test case where we record it and put it on our resources as more documentation. You know, how much can an average person who is interested but isn't a coder do? So if you have time, that would be great. I cannot use the excuse anymore that, no.
Sounds good. Yes, let's do this some point in the near future to record it. See, I don't want to say how far we can go, but maybe based on the earlier discussion about managing text-based documents, what can actually be done. To be very pragmatic here, your goal is to get more stuff done in XR related to documents, or to learn programming or principles of programming. What's the motivation behind this?
I don't care about principles, but what I do care in this context, what I care about is I'm really quite scared because today I learned more about vision. And they've already defined so many things, and this is what we were worried about. You know, it's all about pinching now. You know, Doug was upset there was just one mouse button. Now all we got is this. This is how you make it bigger. This is how you turn something. This is how you scroll something. It's pinch, pinch, pinch. What about the other fingers? There's 3 more fingers. What about grasp that we have in the meta world, right? What about all these things? It's beginning to disappear. So what I would like ideally, Fabian, is simply have something like a Git repository where someone like me can collaborate. Hi, Alan. We're going to switch over to LLMs now that you're here. Just a real brief wind down. And that is, I could imagine working over the shoulder with someone else, what they're doing. And when they're gone, I understand the code enough that I can change the variable, change the background color, change the width of something. That's the key.
Yep. Okay, yeah, that sounds realistic and feasible. So it's a bit more, let's say, having for you an understandable environment with content that is relevant to your problem,
Yes.
and being able to do sufficient adjustment without the person who made the environment to be there eventually then meet, I don't know, regularly, frequently enough for, let's say, deeper changes that you wouldn't be able to do.
Just
Yeah.
showing Peter while you're talking that, you know, use this kind of a fancy mouse. Yeah, exactly that. You know, that's how we democratize this technology. We make those things accessible.
Sure, let's try this. And to be a bit more, to be pragmatic, the demos that I share here regularly with my environment with the text in XR hopefully would be a good fit for this, in the sense that it's, well, first it's in VR or in AR or both, doesn't matter. It's open source. You can host it wherever, and the goal is to make as many efficient modification as you can, still with the code and with text, but not necessarily going all the way to changing the code. Yeah, it's for fast iteration and testing. So I think in this kind of context, and even if some things would have to be adjusted, for example, I don't know, if you want to change a value, you probably don't want to pinch a number, but rather, I don't know, rotate a cylinder made out of numbers or whatever. But basically, the widgets that would make your more frequent changes even more efficient, or more efficient than what it is now. So yeah, sure, count me in. I'm interested.
Fantastic. Thank you. So, Alan, gonna put another link, a link back in here, but because you wanted to talk about LLMs, and I think everybody does, and that's cool. This is an article. Oh, sorry, did I send you? Yeah. It's about reading a book through basically a chatbot, asking questions about the book. I think that's probably related to what you want to talk about. So I'm going to put myself on mute, shut up for a minute, and have you guys start that side of the discussion.
Only if the previous, I'm interested in what you were just talking about too, but only if that feels like that's been thoroughly, or explored. Or
I think it has been, and the point really is, with this whole Sloan thing, yeah, it's great. We have a shot at something, but if we don't have something that is actually useful at the end, I think we've massively failed.
Oh, so this is about having a useful end product, and the definition of that is something where someone could add in variables or sort of alter the program. Is that right?
Not necessarily a normal end user, but I think that we
Yeah.
as a community, someone like Mark and me who, we know techie kind of stuff, but we don't necessarily code, that we can dive in and maybe someone has done a bit of commenting saying, hey, you idiot, this is where the color for background can be changed. Paste your hex here, that level of, and then we share screen and we just get to a point where, sending an email or putting something in Jira or whatever for someone to do something basic is kind of ridiculous. So Fabian, having been evangelizing, having a higher level of coding literacy, I think has become important.
I think that's great. Yeah. Well, it's always a little bit of a Faustian bargain to try and make code available to people who aren't coding. There's always a lag between what the model is and what it can do. I do think, as you said, like even just scoping it down to trusted users opens the doors a lot to what to the flexibility. It reminds me of you mentioned GitHub, and one thing that I do, I'll share my screen for just a second, is I have my blog for the moment set up. Can you see the GitHub repo here? Yeah. Okay. I have this is just my blog that I haven't touched in a while. It's my Speakeasy Saloon, but it's updated automatically whenever I create a new issue, right? So what's neat about this is over here, this looks like there's nothing on the site. If I go to Marbles, here's the blog, right? And if I go to issues and say this is Talking with Fabian, and I add a label, right? Published, right? Then refresh the page, and in a moment, it'll pop up as published. So the reason I bring this up is that it might be possible if you're building this out to you can add templates into GitHub now. And so you can imagine like creating some templates and that filling in the kind of the structure that would be required to be ingested by whatever system, right? You can imagine it being like, here's a comment that I'm going to make. I'm going to call it an issue, but it's actually content, and it's related to these other content blocks or issues, right? And it should have these kind of qualities. And I think it could be. It's been really great to use GitHub Issues as a CMS. And it has the advantage of also being able to take in code. So just throwing that in as an idea.
That's quite elegant. Interesting. Fabian, you got your hand up.
Okay.
I do. I think like it's there is a huge gap between I don't know. I will configure something like change a color, and I feel confident enough that with the sufficient amount of time, I can change anything. My goal, let's say, would be when I try to teach someone is the later, rather have somebody who doesn't know how to change the color of the skybox or cube or whatever, but who have the confidence that if they were to go through the documentation or even ask someone because they get the concept and the vocabulary or the principle behind it, they would be able to sufficiently backtrack, and maybe they would have like a couple of, not constraint, but idea that, if it's open source, I can open the engine and I can look through, etc., etc. So I think it's also something to eventually discuss or see. Like, I think opening up everything and show everything is just overwhelming. It doesn't make sense. Showing that there is a map that you can access, let's say the different parts and bits or whatever, doesn't matter. That is navigable, basically. I think that's interesting and empowering. And some of it would lead, obviously, in, let's say, for the motivation aspect too. If you believe changing the background, for example, or flipping through pages or whatnot is the end goal, let's say, those would be used. But basically, I think it would be as examples in order to show the improving, let's say, the navigability of an imperfect XR document-based tool, to be generic.
This is very, very interesting. One of the main turnoffs for me with coding on any level is all the stuff you have to write before you start coding. You know, load this library and all kinds of lines for this, initialize that. It's really, really interesting. Psychologically, for me, that's a gateway.
Right. So sorry, I just stopped you right there. Like, that's why I give workshop to kids, and there is something in programming called no build that some people do, which I do, specifically because it's not just for kids, it's for anybody. It's basically, if I tell you, we're going to build a spaceship, but first you need to, I don't know, clean up the toilet of your bedroom and read all those books and whatnot. By the time you actually get there, you don't have any passion in anymore. So 100%, like the goal is literally one click and you start messing things up, because to be honest, at the beginning you won't get it. So you're going to break everything and then you can restart from wherever. So I sadly, I understand you, I hear you. Hopefully my promise is not empty, and normally, because I've done it again a couple of times with kids who are not, I don't say kids in the sense of being young or old or whatnot, it's just they are not professional programmers. Absolutely not.
If you're not a programmer, you're a kid.
Well, I think they're writing a lot of things, and for sure they're not afraid to explore, But some of them, like me in the past, have been burned by indeed those layers and layers of, it's like, it feels bureaucratic basically. And it is in a way some kind of gatekeeping. Of course, when you're a professional developer and you have your whole tool set, that's how you see through. Yeah, it's transparent to you. You don't even see the tools anymore. Like just a couple of, I think just yesterday I was looking at, what was it? I forgot, but anyway, a tool, and they say, oh, in order to get the tool running, you just need to subscribe this and then have the service and what else. Like, what do you mean just? Yeah, if you do it every day, it just is. Yeah, it doesn't matter if you don't know what the service even is in the first place. Why would you even sign up there with an account? Like, so anyway, short version is no build. The philosophy behind this is you get the idea, you start messing with things now, not after so many steps that you forget what it is. So yeah, I think it's a very legitimate suggestion or demand or need, let's say, rather. And I'm confident we can do this even with XR. It doesn't have to be, let's say, losing the core of the idea, meaning to be able to explore that medium.
Yeah, just a quick response before Leon takes over. What Alan showed of these little boxes on GitHub, I mean, I could imagine code being written so that some things were surfaced for people like Mark and me. And the rest of it, you know, publish and subscribe was a model on the Mac for quite a while where you could have a document, save it, and then another document you could say, when you open this document, this bit gets inserted, right?
If someone has like a persistent background hissing.
I think it's Leon. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Better.
Sorry. Appreciate it.
If I understood correctly, Frode, yes, and that I've already done that in the past because, for example, I can extract. It's like some of the earliest demos I've shown you, namely that if you have a set of GitHub issue, not GitHub but Git, but anyway, same idea, a code repository with, let's say, labels like to do or work or PDF or whatever, then they would appear in XR. So as long as, for example, the issue on GitHub have an HTTP endpoint, so some way to be queryable programmatically, for example, a JSON object, then you could manipulate them. So that sounds, yes, if you want, for example, to edit in 2D and collaboratively, for example, in a repository shared by all of us, and that would be the content filled up, let's say, in your XR experience, that sounds, yeah, I've done it in the past, it's not hard.
Okay, that was interesting. Sorry, Leon, please go.
No worries. Is the audio acceptable?
Oh, we can hear you clearly. When
Okay.
you're talking, I'm not hearing the hissing, and
Okay.
I'll let you know if it comes back.
It was the compression going up while I was silent. Okay. Yeah, it's that's how like it's a long story. I love music making and compressors and that kind of stuff. And anyways, long story short, Ellen and Fabien were actually pointing out an interesting thing, which is basically what are the commons, where are the commons, and they seem to change, and sort of public commons, I would say. And in other words, like, which is going to be your entry point of the technology stack to start your research, your product, and the choice of that position in the stack might be very, very important in hindsight. For example, Tim Berners-Lee did not start to write assembly when he was going to create his prototype for HTML. And in a similar way, I think it's very important that just like in a movie concept, a concept artist does the first phases to experiment and not use all the actors, all the cameramans yet. I think in a similar way, I think there should be I think Frode especially could be helped a lot with sort of playing in a safe environment without coding first, to sort of get a better sense of where and which technology to use. For example, Ellen's demo shows sort of an entry point in the stack where GitHub is a sort of public commons, where you would use that as a starting point. You don't have to worry about text editors or uploading HTML to a web server. It's sort of a higher level thing. And in a similar way, there is A-Frame, which sort of promotes writing HTML yourself and creating an XR environment through that. But there are also systems like Babylon or Unity or Unreal, which are sort of more like desktop application style, quick prototyping environments. And all of these, these different positions in the stack, they all have their pros and cons. And what I always find very interesting about this, that you only have like one moment in time where you just have to bet on one of them, and then later you will have to deal with all the limitations and the craft which comes with that. And it's a very interesting topic. And to be honest, I don't have a really good environment answer to that. But I think it can be very critical. While, for example, Frode would be learning A-Frame and all that kind of stuff. At the same time, maybe Apple comes out with a vision editor, which gives access to all kinds of next level features, which would only arrive years later in the web browser. So that it's a very tricky choice.
Yeah, I'd like to add on to that too, and I believe Fabian said this, but I just want to stress my agreement and the kind of Faustian bargain thing. If it becomes a priority, as it often happens in enterprise and in various internal projects, that a thing that is, experimental and being built on needs to be interacted with by other members who are not building it, it can quickly become a maintenance nightmare and can derail the entire project because it's still changing so quickly, right? It's like, I think it's typically a better relationship or understanding to say, let's move fast, let's get to some sort of final state. And when things settle down, then we see the patterns and we can start to expose these endpoints to, it allow more people to tinker with it, play with it. But if you do that too soon, it can really derail a project. Go ahead, Mark.
Just a thought. It was partly prompted by the earlier comment about having what was it called, the no build start and things. Is one of the things as someone who sort of knows enough about coding to know that I will never be able to do it successfully. So I have a tremendous respect for a skill that I don't have and would struggle to acquire. I think it's worth putting that up front. But my heart, I'm a bit depressed by the fact that the sort of the tilt of things is always, if only the rest of the world would think like programmers. And very rarely is it, why don't we program for human beings who don't think like we do? And so you end up, everything ends up looking like an IDE, which is really exciting if you code all day. It's actually but ugly and it makes your eyeballs bleed if you don't code, because it doesn't look like anything you're used to using. It's not clear what the affordances are. I had a really interesting occasion this week. I was doing something with Gabo, who wanted me to install Minter. And we had 5 minutes while he was trying to explain to me where I found the download for the app he wanted off a GitHub page, because it was so obvious that even he had to go and look for it. because he knew where to look for it. He didn't know how to find it because it was actually right down at the bottom of the page and there was no jump link at the top. Despite this was the main thing you did on this page was to go and download a program. But I mean, I think that speaks volumes about this thing. And the difficulty is we tend to just slide into a sort of thing where everyone's saying, well, I don't like this and everyone should think like me. But I'd love to see more going into making interfaces sort of more generally non-code codey looking. I don't know what the answer is, but I'm sure we can do better than we are at the moment. I think because and I'll finishing on this point because Alan, you rightly made the point that things move very fast, and a real nightmare is trying to basically change the engines out on the aircraft as you're flying along. And it's easy to get yourself in the situation where you're trying to help people and put things onto whatever you're building. You end up with an unmaintainable thing. But I think that's a separate problem to the fact that just stepping back and saying, does everything have to look like an IDE? I don't think it does. I think too much does, though, and we should dwell on that a bit more. Frode.
We can't hear you. At least I can't hear you.
Sorry. I was just saying I like Lego, and Edgar really likes Lego, which is fun. And I know there have been many versions of visual programming or whatever. But, there was HyperCard. That was a thing what existed, isn't it? Right? And it was very much choose your level of how you want to manipulate it. And I am very grateful for this discussion today, because if we manage to learn something today and hopefully get onto LLMs soon, it may help us in how we produce the stuff for Sloan, so that any year when people can try reading PDFs, in XR, and they like it, but there's something they want to change, we've done it in such a way that they can. Of course, we're doing open source. Of course, we'll make an effort to document it in every which way. But if we also have these levers available, not just the big settings, if we really think this through, we could really demonstrate that. That would be insanely amazing. I mean, one of the things I wonder about is, in order to make a pinch gesture, there's got to be somebody writing some lines of codes, invoke this library to allow a pinch gesture to happen. And on pinch, I mean, I do know JavaScript kind of stuff. On pinch, do this, right? On no longer pinch, do something else, all of that stuff. And a human can understand that. And it doesn't have to be written with all kinds of specific stuff. Some of those things should be pluggable, even if it has to be with text. And even though, don't forget, because the Faustian bargain you said, Leon, is spot on, right? It's like I can do a lot of graphic stuff, but I'm not really good at drawing. If I was really good at drawing, I could basically draw everything. So I think I'm now drawing an analogy. Your level of skill at a certain point, unless you do the extreme full stack, you will come up against something. But right now, we're talking about building an XR reading environment. So if we have some fun with how we architect this, it'll also be fun and interesting what we open up, right? Fabien, fight.
No, it's to give another example. Friday morning, I cooked soup in the morning because why not? It's getting cold in Belgium. But the point is, somehow I completely forgot about it. And I forgot the soup on the stove. But not because I'm a professional programmer, but because I believe programming is intrinsically valuable, regardless of having a computer. I programmed the timer of the stove so that after 15 minutes or whatever was on the recipe, it would stop on its own. So it's a very boring example, but I think in terms of what's the point of programming, it is, I hope, an empowering example, namely that it is to give whoever is using programming agency. And it's really not more complicated than this to do it on the computer. It's just you stack more of it. And yes, you have like an endless amount of tools, but in practice, the principle is you can prepare actions in advance. Yeah.
But my beautiful European friend, you're now going down the what Mark talked about earlier. If people are like us, I'm going to read you all a poem. It's 2 words long. Okay, is this to illustrate a point? I'm not going completely batty. High chair. High chair. So that's my poem. Right? I'm all about text, but the different pronunciations there, how you split the word, completely changes everything. And I'll tell you why. And this is about being able to have agency in different ways. Because when you talk about agency, we all get very, rah, rah, rah. There are many ways to have agency. I was listening, my son loves Harry Potter. We were listening to the beginning of Harry Potter read by Stephen Fry. Stephen Fry is gay. Stephen Fry doesn't have kids. You know, he's chosen not to have kids. When he read a high chair, we parents in English, if there's a baby, the baby sits in a high chair. It's one word. In reading Harry Potter, he wrote sitting in the high chair. So the reason I think this is a really interesting and important point is he doesn't know what a high chair is. And the way he pronounces it, right?
Boy, that took me a minute to connect the dots there. Wow.
It's weird, right? So just by saying one word in 2 ways, you have revealed 2 completely different lifestyles.
Can I, this is a great segue.
You're next anyway.
Yep. So I'm going to lower my hand. I'm going to share my screen because this is another thing that I kind of brought up or alluded to in the DMs. But Mark, when you were talking about a better interface, everything seems like an IDE. I agree with that, right? And this is actually why I think we, or this project rather, should, without being AI infused, it should embrace the changes that are happening. I mean, as an example, right, you know, like I just ask for this little prompt and I get something that would, you know, wouldn't be able to do this, right? And the same can be said for even if we create, instead of like an interface to go to, if we created a language to use or some a context window instructions for GPT that you can add in whatever you want, and your examples of, yeah, when I do this gesture, you know, you may have to know a code word for that, but say like,
I have to open the door, but I'm very glad you did this segue. Please don't go too far. I'm so sorry.
Sure. So I didn't see any of these messages. The idea is that I think this would be a perfect way to embrace, or at least not embrace on one side, and also not get too sunk into processes that are of the traditional programming mindset. When we have this great new handicap tool, you know, to help do a whole lot more than we're still kind of adjusting to what's possible. This tool can easily format content into something that is syntactically useful, XML, JSON, whatever. And then there's even some hacks that can be done on like code words and other things. And then and the advantage is you get something that is a block of code with content in it, and that can just be added into a GitHub issue that Fabian or whomever can just suck it into the system until things are more stable. That's where I think it would be useful to have an open mind about what can be done here, not to bake AI into the core of it per se. We can go into some of those examples. Yeah, Fabian, you got your hand up. Go for it.
Sorry, I put it down. It's an old hand.
Old hand. Okay.
Just a very quick one on that is I love this example, and I because what it says to me is the really interesting part of the area that where we are at the moment is it's almost this that it's a sort of synthesis and extraction thing, and so one of the things that I don't see it being used as much as it could be is almost saying to yourself, is what I've described what I thought I described? Because sometimes having it told back to you is an indication of just how much of your thought was left in here and didn't escape to the medium via these. And of course, it's a bit like trying to find the mistake in your math homework. It's on line 1 and you keep skipping past it because you know what you wrote. So you don't actually read it. And so, as you say, it's nice. This is an interesting thing of abstracting, sitting away from the sort of formality of code. I really like it.
Great. I think it could be, it's not like AI, Frode, what I just added to is like, when I was saying that yesterday, I wasn't saying infusing AI into the core of the work, but being open about how these tools that are already evolving at a rapid pace, can be almost treated as a independent variable to make the system itself more flexible and useful. We've already all done the summarize this PDF for me, right? Is one example. Mark's example is even better, where using it with a little bit of a deliberation of saying, explain this to me as if I'm from the outside of this, even something you just wrote. So with that, let's get through the comments and then we can transition into the LLM, more LLM. Go for it, Leon or Frode.
Leon, you're muted.
Thanks. This is a really cool example. I was also thinking that, if LLMs become a very normal thing to sort of embed in our daily workflows, then I could also imagine LLMs becoming part of our daily XR workflows. And I could imagine a similar thing would happen to the web, where you got webhooks, which allowed all kind of work to be automated through web servers. In a similar way, I could imagine that LLMs start to sit in between all kinds of interactions. We will have not between web servers, but just between you and something you're working on, and so as sort of agents on the side. So that's a cool thing you triggered there in my brain, and thanks
Excellent.
for that.
And Fabian, I know this is not this is probably antithetical to everything that you're about. The example of bringing in OpenAI a little bit more, but it's not saying like tying it to an API or anything, right? It's just kind of like, hey, process this for me, and then I can go plop it out and do something else. Anyway, it keeps things open and flexible, and it's good to explore. Yeah, go ahead, Fred.
I'm going to ask you a very crazy basic question, but I'm going to ask it from two specific points of view. What is an LLM? I know about an LLM from a large language model, lots of computers and lots of data. But what is an LLM in terms of a smaller, let's say the thing we looked at earlier, one book? If one book gets ingested into a thing, an AI thing, we should probably call it something else, by the way, because it's not about intelligence, is it? Sorry, that was a coffee bean. I apologize. Let's use your language, Alan. Let's say we take a book and we turn it into an LLM, or what is the process? Talk to me like I have absolutely no clue.
Well, I mean, the process, if you want to get like good results immediately, it would be along the lines of it's still going to, an LLM is still going to be trained on large data, just understand how language works, right?
Yeah.
And then it would be that those assumptions and models would then be applied to a book, PDF, or corpus, with the assumption that that's its immediate range of attention. That's where the things that are going on in these books should be weighted more strongly than its understanding of the rest of the world, right? And so a lot of prompt engineering, context windows, embeddings. So in this case, a PDF might be considered an embedding. These are all example or attempts at doing like starting with a large language model and applying it to a small world. They, because of that, have a lot of there's a lot of people that say that this already works, you know, because it works in their particular situation, and you try it out and it's like, okay, it doesn't really work that great, you know. To give you an example, like if you upload a PDF, you know, that's going to be maybe, or let's say a situation where you're uploading 10,000 more words than was usually allowed in GPT, right? And for the record, I'm not an expert in any of this stuff. If you introduced a corpus that is like 10,000 more words than it usually is allowed, that doesn't mean that it's going to be reading those 10,000 words as accurately as it would read a sentence, a prompt, right? It's going to lose its attention. It's going to sort of like, in the same way that, that's not a great analogy, but if you divide 2 by 2 million, you're going to get a pretty large number. If you divide 2 by 4, you're going to get a much smaller number, right? If its attention can focus on a smaller thing, it's going to be more precise. If it's going to be on a larger window, it's going to be less precise because it's allocating only so much attention to that larger corpus. Yes.
Thank you. So that means, okay, so first of all, the larger corpus, does that have a distinct name? Is that what we just call an LLM, right?
Well, let's, for the sake of this conversation, let's call the LLM the background truth, the thing that it's been trained on previously, right?
Okay, so that's the first contentious issue. Without going into the politics of it at all, that's not really for this group. The situation in Israel and Gaza, when people have been doing ChatGPT, depending on which side you ask it from, it gives incredibly loaded answers. It's just a current example. Let's not go into good or bad or anything like that now, okay? But what I mean is when you use the word truth, I know you were using ground truth, so this is not me jumping on you, Alan, at all. I'm just saying, will there be opportunities, do you think, in the future where someone can decide more on which kind of LLM they want to put into effect? Because right now, if you use ChatGPT, you can do 3.54 and you can do their flavors, but you cannot say, I want one with an Asian perspective or with British perspective, because these perspectives do exist and they are real. And if you, depending on the kind of knowledge work you want to do, you may want to have it represent your worldview or kind of the opposite.
Yeah, no, I think some of that's already possible in some degrees. I mean, depending on your definition. One thing I love to do is after having a conversation with ChatGPT, going down some crazy rabbit holes, asking nonsense stuff, I'll ask it to summarize what we just talked about as if they are Richard Feynman. And I do that because I like how casual and excitable Feynman is in his writing. It is, and I should find the example. I asked it to summarize in as Feynman and then as Ryle, you know, Gilbert Ryle, and Gilbert Ryle's was awful. Feynman's was great. Now, whether it's going to say, Feynman, what do you think about Gaza, right? I don't think that's in place yet, but certainly that is not a fundamental flaw. That is more of a computational resources flaw.
Well,
go ahead.
The corpus on which it has been trained for this particular issue, which is strongly in the news at the moment, you know, the reports, the kind of the writings I have seen are incredibly different. And again, that is just that example. But even with other things, and Mark has been harping on about this in a very good way as well, and that is the transformations. So you, Alan, you used the example with take this text and present it as though Richard Feynman wrote it. That is a really useful translation, as long as the system understands Richard Feynman's perspective well enough. right? And it may very well do that in this context, but I'm just saying that going into the future, we will rely more and more on these things, and there will be more and more hidden biases.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And there will be Fabian Ollie goes, and just to finish the sentence here. There is already an incredible bias baked in simply the idea that academic or literary culture has far more artifacts to build from than Aboriginal culture, right? So you can't ask GPT, what does, my Aborigine neighbor think of this, and expect to get something that is not, its best effort.
That's great. That is a really great point. So here's the question then. Is it likely that we will be able to, one of us, let's say we go to Australia, we interview Aboriginal tribes, we create a corpus of knowledge based on them, and we say, actually, this is the LLM I want to use. And, to influence the huge, massive, billions of word one.
I want to let Fabian go, but I think that what we'll find is that that's we're asking too much of this particular technology to think that it can do that. And people will want to do that and try to do that and say that it works. And I don't think that is a good long-term strategy.
Well, just because it is so important. So, okay, go back to the current conflict that is horrible for, I'm sure we all agree it's horrible on so many levels, so many levels. A lot of the language we see being used is one side is referred to by this kind of language, the other side is referred to by this kind of language. And, it seems to have been informed by years and years and years of the media using this language. So now we're kind of stuck with it. So that's saying that can there be ways where we can say, here's a corpus of knowledge. Okay, sorry, I'll rephrase it, and then please, Fabian, go after Alan completely agrees with me. Up here, we have the huge, massive world LLM, right? Here we have a book or some document that we want to deal with now. But then we have a third set, which is kind of the waiting set. So if let's say we want to have Gaza described from a Lebanese perspective to try to be a bit neutral, but still topical. So here is a set of Lebanese authors and newspapers that I want to influence the massive LLM in order to parse this one. Could a third one come into play?
I think what you described is possible. Yeah, like that. If I understand it correctly, that's possible. So, and Fabian, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, that was all over the place.
So one of the reasons I work in WebXR is very pragmatic. It's because I was a web developer who focusing on the web when XR appeared, let's say, and I thought, okay, that's a pathway to it. But the, let's say, justification on why I keep doing it is because, let's say, hopefully in a couple of weeks, when the Lynx, the company in France that make a VR headset, will be on my desk finally after years of waiting with the Kickstarter, I'll take my code, I'll run on it, and it will give me the same result as on the Quest or any other headset supporting WebXR. Why do I mention it? Is because I think if we step back a bit, let's say the trendiest one at the moment is OpenAI, which I don't like or support. The problem is the performance are impressive. I don't think it's sufficient, let's say. But if one decides to rely on it, that's okay. If the dependency is not a trap, basically, if you can basically swap it, if you can say OpenAI, I don't know, have a bias or can be political, can be something else, can be the way they do business, doesn't really matter. But basically, if you can swap it for one which whatever feels your criteria better, then I think the risk is not so high. So I think it's important, let's say, to keep standard specification, whatever, in mind, so that I actually want to get excited by LLMs or all the new tools at the moment, but I cannot because there is this black hole of OpenAI pulling everything towards it. But if it's used again as something, a component that can be swapped for another whenever a new one, a better one arrives, then I want to get excited again, because I'm not, again, building or jumping in a trap or locking myself down the system. It's exactly the same as, for example, the Vision Pro. I want to get excited by it, but if I get stuck in the Apple ecosystem, I can't get excited by it. So that's, let's say, a little bit like my motivation to want to be thinking of LLMs as, let's say, a set of them. That's why I use the plural one, not just the quote unquote best one or more popular one. It's just a brick or like a component that you can swap. And that's also why in the chat a couple of days ago, I was thinking, or I was suggesting, should we list the different ones? Just having actually even two, let's say OpenAI and whatever Bloom, or even no matter how shitty ones, just to get into the habit of saying, okay, I changed the endpoint, maybe a couple of parameters over there, but I'm mindful that I'm not putting all my eggs in the same basket. And eventually, if we do this collaboratively with a couple of examples, we can say, okay, now it's usable, now it's not usable, it's usable in that context. Honestly, I think a lot of times, like I see so many people now switching from Google to DuckDuckGo. They were stuck in Google because they were convincing themselves that the quality was better. And now they're waking up, say, whoa, actually, it's not better. It's just my entire world is filtered through this tool. So I cannot think outside of it. So I think I imagine it would be the same kind of problem here. Now, there were a couple of points touched on. In terms of LLM, the large part is how large the database or the amount of text we use for training was, basically. And it's a kind of an arm race at the moment for all those companies to have the biggest data center, the biggest data set. Doesn't really matter where it comes from, if it even was acquired legally or not. Like it's a fucking mess. And I think, again, here it's interesting to say, okay, I use this one because it's more performant, but I'm aware that this one that might be slightly less performant, for example, is only using open source code. And that code has not been, it has been validated by the users. They did accept explicitly for their code to be used, for example. So I think, yeah, there were, let's say, some kind of compromise, different targets, but having a practice of being mindful of which one can be used. Because if you use small LLMs, not like OpenAI, but things that, again, it could run on my desktop. Like I have an old, like 4 years old VR desktop, so nice graphic card. My hope is to stick it in my basement the next time I buy a good computer, so that I can run LLMs but in my basement, that nothing goes out of the house. It's only used, let's say, when I need, not like 24/7. So I think, yeah, there is a lot that can be built, and I think in the right way, and not having to rely on black box that give not just biased result, but yeah, with the, yeah, I don't want to rant on OpenAI too much. I'm just saying there are alternatives, and it's, I think, a healthy process not to stick everything on that one platform.
Agree. That's why in Author and Reader, the AI is not called ChatGPT, even though we use it as called Ask AI. So in the future, you can plug anything in to do that. It's a stupidly simple thing. It's just to show I agree. And then also, remember Keiichi had these personal little agent bots versus one that had everything. Very, very similar to this. So I do think the discussion of how to enable multiple things to be used is really, really important, because your rant, which was so appreciated against the Google world, it is ridiculously important. And we're getting to another level now where I may have mentioned some of this before, but obviously in our brain we have bundles of nerve fibers of neurons, right? and they connect things. So let's imagine some things are more connected than other things, like the word tea with a picture of tea or whatever it might be, right? So if some things are really well connected, what things are not? What is it in our brains, superhighways, that are not well connected? These are our unknowns. These are our lacunas. These are black holes, right? If we're going to understand our brains better, we need better ways to interrogate systems that help us think. So to be able to say, right now, I don't care. I'm just going to use Siri. Give me the answer. That's okay in certain situations, but if you're doing more serious work, you may say, I want these specific perspectives to be brought to bear, and they have been handmade by these particular groups. So I think we're all on the same page here, that sometimes big and efficient is great. Other times custom may be a bit rougher, but to help us think around things our brains wouldn't naturally think, and an LLM may not naturally think, is fantastic. I mean, imagine if we can start having really nice prompts along the lines of, what am I missing here? You know, of course we can say that today, but, you know, just diving into this. Leon and Mark and Fabian and everyone, go, sorry.
Thanks. I want to dive a bit deeper into this this conflicting situation, and I would like to ask for this call to be labeled "Deal with the Devil" or not, because this is a recurring theme. And before Fabian gets the idea that I'm against his ideas, I'm actually completely on board with everything Fabian says. At the same time, I have another voice in me, which is extremely frustrating. It's a voice who says, hey, did you know that mainframe computers were dominant for quite some years? And at some point, people started, to realize how crazy this is. And this whole personal computer revolution disrupted the whole mainframe situation. And in a sense, this, to me, this open AI seems a bit like a mainframe happening, mainframe movement, a large computing power, impossible to compete with. And if you look at the big scheme of things, there is this ping pong effect from mainframe going back to micro, going back to super huge. So in that sense, I am very confused, because then I get this voice thinking or saying to me, the hell with this activism. Let's just get a OpenAI membership, see what you can do with it. And by the time everybody starts to understand what it's all about, then maybe it's time to really, be the activist or do something about it, because now you're really getting crushed by this open AI hype. And so yeah, this is really confusing for me as well, because you don't want to get stuck being some kind of a stickler or naysayer, and then leave all the innovation up to the people who give monkeys about rights and all these things. So yeah, this is a very, I have a bit of a sort of conflict inside me as well about this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Leon. Absolutely. Mark.
I've got perhaps a more pedestrian question. I'm rather aware that we're not exactly a sort of a gathering of experts on AI, but one of the things that I sort of get confused is there seem to be two aspects of these large models, and I'm leaving on one side the sort of current Western tech capitalism approach of winner takes all and just borging everything, but presumably the size of the corpus does potentially two things. One is it actually has subject matter to inquire against, reason against, but the other side is what's driving the sort of almost the human-like aspect of it. because it basically has more samples to work out something that looks plausibly human, which is actually a separate thing. Presumably, if anything, the latter works better off a large corpus. And that seems to be one of the things that's, when I sort of step back from that's happened, one of the reasons it suddenly got a lot better was they just chucked a whole lot more data in. I think what we've also realized is that data doesn't make it any cleverer. It just writes what it doesn't know more cleverly, which confuses us because, of course, we're culturally not quite attuned to that. We're sort of, our cultural legacy at the moment is probably most of the people in this room sort of grew up with hearing, the broadcaster on the telly, reading the news and telling you the facts. And I think that's how people treat maybe some of the AI systems at the moment. And I'm desperately trying to teach myself to not regard it like that, to always, trust but verify, I think is the thing. But am I right? I mean, am I right in terms of, so there are essentially two aspects, two different things you get out of the size of corpus?
I think also there was what OpenAI. First, I bet quite a lot. They don't explain their infrastructure, but I bet quite a lot that we would. You heard the Siri scandal like a year or two ago, where somehow when the query were not understandable, there was an actual human that would actually type the query or even answer it. So there was a human in the loop. I would absolutely not be shocked if that was discovered a couple years down the line, that, okay, maybe 80% of the query go through ChatGPT and GPT-4, but 10%, 5%, 0.1%, whatever, a certain percent is not just like tailored, but there is an actual human being answering. Like I would really, that wouldn't shock me. They would say, oh, it's like, I don't know, reinforcement learning or quality control, or it's teaching the machine to do better in like edge cases or whatnot. But yeah, again, I put it on the record there as a bet. That would be super disappointing in the sense of they still do amazing research, but yeah, that wouldn't shock me. Now for Leon, I want to help you feel less trapped in there. I do recommend that you actually do buy an OpenAI account and use it. Not again to rely on it, not to become dependent of it, but to actually sift through the bullshit, see what we can actually do or cannot do. I'm not saying like absolutely, they were not actually selling weapons. It's not like military abusing of power or something like this. So still have to relativize it. But I think if you pay $10 or whatnot to try it, learn how it works, see the limits, that to me, that's a completely acceptable risk. And I did it. I did give money to OpenAI because I don't want to criticize something without even knowing it. Now, I think it's different to give $10 to an already large company versus giving $10 every day or every month, or doing it and then starting to make your entire business, let's say, out of it. So again, it's a term of like, are you creating a dependency? Are you also using it and telling everybody it's amazing without being aware of the consequences of it in terms of politics or ecology, etc.? But I think, yeah, it's even naive not to try those. Like I don't like Meta, and I have a Quest 3 on my desk. So every time, or pretty much every time I post a demo online, I hope an interesting one, but there is like a little whining after or before or nearby to say, hey, it's an amazing piece of tech. The technology again itself, the R&D itself, like for OpenAI, I don't question, I can't even do this kind of thing. It's amazing, blah, blah, blah. But the business model, all the side effects that are hidden from the marketing campaigns is different. So I would say, no, go for it, use it, but in a mindful manner, in a manner that you don't both depend on it and then invite others also to use it just because it's cool, just because it's new, etc. And that they get completely unaware of the true cost, because you as a technologist, you can actually explain them. Like, okay, it does good things, like in terms of efficiency, but the true cost is blah, 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 blah. And I think it's very different than just naively using it.
So here's a follow-up question, and Fabian, you get double thumbs up for me on what you just said. It's kind of the, yeah. So how can we make a corpus, an LLM thing, from our recordings to inform the big LLM for people to interrogate our books? Can we do that?
So I want to also add, so far this is not even close to what I want to talk about at some point, which is an entirely different issue of LLM as adapter or transposer or
That's
or
what I
whatever.
wanted to get to. That's what I mean by this question.
Well, what I see. That's still totally different. But it I don't think it would be technically not difficult. You know, that can be done today. I think that what would need to be looked at is a multi-step process to try and get the valuable stuff out without having to manually do that. I also think that OpenAI has a multi-step process whenever it trains a large model, and same with Anthropic. I don't think it's as simple as training a large model, being taken out of the oven, you're done. I think there's many steps that are, given the size of the corpus that they're working with, it doesn't seem like much, so that maybe, you know, they don't even include it. But there's definitely, and this goes to what Peter was saying earlier, there are steps even before the guardrails come into play that are almost, I assume, like their own copyrighted meta language that guides the new model on what to just drop, you know, what to stay away from, etc. And then as far as the training or going to live agents, I think it's more likely that conversations after the fact are sent to a live agent to get them to answer the same thing without GPT, and use that as kind of a feedback loop mechanism to see how well or poorly the automated system is going. I don't think that it's necessarily happening live. I would like to share something to open our minds up a little bit too. This had something to do with, I believe, what Leon and what Fabian were talking about. If it's okay, it's just a few minutes. Do you mind if I share this video? Because I think it'll frame the conversation in a different way slightly. This is Mary Rose Cook, who is an incredible human being. She makes software for children, she's a humanist, you know, and this is her new tool that she has made pretty quickly.
And the tool uses several techniques to support that. Direct manipulation of objects as much as possible.
I'll just jump ahead.
Quickly. It's composed of an editor, which runs on the desktop, and the game, which runs on a phone. The goal of Lude is to make games quickly, and the tool uses several techniques to support that. Direct manipulation of objects as much as possible. Liveness, where edits are loaded into the latest game state to be tried instantly, and code generation. I'm going to demo Lude by making the old school game Breakout. So we start by adding an object that's going to be the ball, and we set its type to ball, and then we make it a bit bigger so that it makes it easier to draw. And we choose a nice yellow color and draw in the ball. Then we resize it to the right size and get it into position. Next, we're going to add some walls. We're using direct manipulation for all of this, of course, to both size things, and also when we want to draw, then we draw directly on the thing we're drawing. We set those walls so that they don't move, so that they just rebound, so the ball rebounds off them. And now we're drawing in that first wall. We're then going to duplicate the wall to make 3 other walls and get those all into position. And this will keep the ball within the bounds. Now let's add a button that will start the game off. And when this button's tapped in the game, then it will set the ball moving. So we've got the button, it's got the right text on it, but now we need to add some behavior. So we're going to use some code generation to do that. So when tapped, sets the ball's vertical velocity to 6. So that will just get the ball moving down. We generated some code, and now I'm going to hold up my phone where the game's actually running, tap the button, and you can see the ball gets going. So super live, our change was instantly available, instantly ready to be tried out. Next, we're going to add a paddle, which is what the player controls in the game. So the player will be able to tap to move the paddle around. So we'll draw that in a nice green color. And then we'll add the behavior of the paddle. So when the player taps the screen, the paddle moves slowly in the X and Y direction towards the location of the tap. We use that to generate some code, and then we try it out instantly on the phone. So I'm tapping on my phone on the bottom right there. You can see the paddles moving around, and the player's now able to control the ball. Next, we want to add some slightly more sophisticated behavior. So I've selected both the ball and the paddle so I can talk about them both at the same time. And we want to make it so that the player has a bit more control over the ball. So if the ball hits kind of farish to the left of the paddle, it should sort of ping off more sharply to the left. And if the ball hits more to the right of the paddle, it should ping off more sharply to the right. And so this way, the player can direct the ball more intentionally. So we're using that description to generate some more code, which controls how the ball collides off the paddle. And then we get to test it out instantly. And you can see that it bounces off much more sharply when it hits on that left-hand side there. So now we want to limit the speed of the ball. So we want it to never go above a speed of 6, just so that it doesn't gather too much momentum and start going at super fast speeds. So let's test that. And that looks pretty good. Next, we're going to add the bricks, which is the final part of breakout. So the object of breakout is to direct the ball at the bricks, and when the ball hits brick, then it destroys the brick. So we'll add in a nice orange colored brick there. And then we'll use direct manipulation again to add in some more bricks. And so notice how all of these changes are instantly being loaded in the game on the right, which I've screen shared on the top right there. And now I'm going to talk about the behavior. Again, we can talk about 2 objects or more objects at the same time. So when the brick detects it's collided with the ball, move the brick down by 600 pixels. So that just moves us off the screen and makes it look like it's been destroyed. Let's test that out instantly. And there go the bricks. And so that's breakout.
So that's an example of that. Hey, why did I want to show this? One, large language models, and you know, she may be using Llama, she may be using OpenAI, whatever, but it's doing a whole lot more heavy lifting than we typically associate with. You know, some people think of the LLMs as a question answerer, but in this case, in her interface, she has changed the context window beforehand to say, when I put these instructions in, I expect you to match it up with some syntax that I'm using, that the game interface reads and understands. And there may be some other parts of that. It's open source that could be easy to see just what she did. But the point is that, you know, this is stuff that just a few months ago you have to reason about for quite a while to say, like, okay, these are the behaviors that I want. And even if I could write that out, how do I turn that? How do I do collision detecting? And then you got to match the syntax. You got to do all this extra stuff. So I don't remember exactly what that related to somewhere in the last 30 minutes, but go ahead.
Everything. Okay, this is amazing. I've seen some of this before, but I have some issues. Obviously, this is magic, you know, there's no question about that, and also useful. From my perspective, though, there was a lot of I generate code and then I add a thing. Of course, it was just a brief demo, just giving a human reaction here. Where the hell does that code go? How do you find it later? How can you know how it relates, right? So I'm just saying it would be nice to learn more. It is, you know, this kind of stuff you're talking about, I think we should really, really investigate, especially when working with our environments.
Yeah, you know, she's pulling from an API, so she's getting the response from some LLM connecting via API. So that's different than the chat interface that's so popular. So she can do whatever she wants with those responses.
So
right?
once that gray type with the code is created, where does she put it? How does it go into the system? How do we see the full program?
We can go to GitHub probably where it's
No, and this is not me criticizing. I think this is
Yeah, no, I
something
know.
that we should keep thinking about it, but it would be,
Yeah.
It's almost like, yeah.
My point is like, yeah, this is where it's going to be expanding in the next few months, right? Like already ChatGPT has opened up the ability to connect GPT with your API endpoints or whatever, so that or pull in webhooks with the goal, sinister goal for sure, if you know, probably sinister because it gets you locked in. But the idea is that you could get a response back, and assuming that that response back is going to be pretty stable, right? Not like, what are your thoughts on Plato, but something pretty simple, then it gets shot automatically back out to whatever system you want. And then that response isn't just text anymore, it is actually running a system. Right? It's
Yeah.
the rules to interact and control.
Crazy amazing. And I can see Fabiana's itching to speak.
Yeah, and I'll very quickly share my screen because we have less than a minute left.
I have a bit more time today if you guys do, just since we finally started the topic.
Let me know if you can see here. Can you see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that's my usual environment with a bunch of text and code and whatnot. And there is this little function at the bottom called random array. And that's like a detail from the console where basically I used an endpoint using a model that is open source called Syntac Coder.
What is an endpoint?
Sorry, it's a URL basically. Instead of having a document that is already written, you get the output of an algorithm, which can be an LLM if you don't run it locally. So endpoint is an address where you say, for example, here after the fetch, that's the endpoint where I send it my query with a certain the content. We cannot read it, but I was basically which is a bit silly from my part. We should see it, and it should say something like, write a JavaScript code snippet that take an array of numbers and shuffle it, basically, something like that. And the endpoint give you back the JSON structure, the object, basically. And here it's on a website called Hugging Space, which is famous for AI, let's say, work. But I have the same later on my desktop. It's exactly the same, let's say, model. And then here I got the text. And that text is JavaScript code that is correct. And I can try it by evaluating right there in the browser. So running that code. And then I get a random array or an array of a dozen of numbers or something like this.
Leave it up, please, when you finish. Just leave it up when you finish, please.
Yeah. And that was in February last year and integrated, let's say, in the whole XR environment. So I'm not I'm not criticizing what she's shown. I definitely think it's interesting. What I would argue is more interesting in her demo is, well, first, it's a full-blown environment where she can go back and forth. and she can manipulate directly the how do you say, the sprites, the visual objects that are going to make the game. And I think that's quite, let's say, domain specific. Like it wouldn't work in XR. But if I were to say name an object, let's say here, visual keyboard or console behind, etc., and instead of generating an array, I would say manipulate the console or put the result of the array in the console, and that my environment is made for this, maybe with a couple of helper function, that would indeed make a very, I think, interesting tool. But I think there are a lot of work behind this to be done. And I think also, I just give a little bit of warning. When I made that example, I asked the model, I don't know, 2 or 3 times, or maybe the first time it gave me a good result, and the 2 or 3 next time it did not. Like it gave me some gibberish,
Right.
basically, something that was not correct. So I'm just saying a little asterisk with this demo that I don't know how long she spent running the example and recording, but I would not be surprised if half of the time or a third of the time the AI model
yeah.
would give her gibberish, and that it's just not shown in the video because it's more exciting, or it doesn't, it gives gibberish, but because she's a professional developer, she can say, oh, it's gibberish, or it doesn't work because of this and this. So I just want to warn people not to get too hyped. I think the potential is exciting, but how it actually works, and for example, when I run it on my machine, you can hear my desktop starting to heat up.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the value of doing it locally, is you're very aware of the ecological cost of doing this versus me typing on my keyboard. I also heat up, but I mean, you can tell it's not the same way, and it's not going to have the same ecological consequence. So I'm not saying it's better or worse. I'm just saying by doing it locally, you're also aware of how the sausage is made, basically.
Yeah, to just put it in context, I don't think, like, I think the generated code part is old hat for her too. I think she spun this up honestly last weekend. I haven't seen her talk about this ever before. And she's far more like about like pragmatic coding practices. And I think she was more excited about the live environment and the ability to draw objects and he's like, you know, get the LLM to understand the object. Silicon Jungle is his name's James, but Silicon Jungle on Twitter has something that is similar in spirit, but it is insane, where it seems insane if you're not familiar with kind of what's going on, but he has a 3D field. He has a video game, and you can type in, you know, like, have the drone go over and say hi to the robot, you know, and then it generates code. And so I asked him about that. I was like, okay, I could see a lot of ways for this going wrong. Like, does this work this way or this way? You know, and version B being essentially, there's a list of options, available options, and you can write whatever you want, but then the process that his code's going to run after the LM generates the syntax is say, which of these does this match? You know, like a choose your own adventure, right?
Yes.
Like drone can go up or down, left or right, can talk to whomever, but you know, you can't say, hey, drone, go make a pizza. It'll be like, I don't understand that, you know?
Yeah.
Okay, two things. Okay, Fabien, respond, obviously, and then 2 things.
Oh, I'm listening. Makes sense. Because indeed, it's like how much of it is. We when we see something like this, we think of endless possibilities, and it might not be correct.
Exactly.
That's it.
So 2 things. First of all, you may know, call me uncle.
Hey,
My brother had a baby earlier this week.
Congratulations.
that's great.
Yeah,
That is a baby.
his name is Oscar Andreas. So that's just amazing thing. Yeah. Anyway, so please show the other slide. Other screenshot, Fabien.
Yep.
So as you guys probably know, well, you all do, when you do generative AI to make an image, including inside Photoshop, you usually get 3 results, and you pick one that you want, right?
Yeah.
So I could imagine, okay, so this to me would be an absolute dream. Let's say that we agree to build an XR environment for reading PDFs. Sorry, I'm going to stick to that. Just keep it simple for the first year. But we work together to make the creation and recreation as amazing as possible and as open as possible. That means that Mark and I are part of it. We are your guinea pigs because we are the least of your mentality, right? So I could imagine working on different aspects, such as here is code only for the view of the document when it's not visual, sorry, when it's using visual meta or HTML, whatever. Here's that code, nothing else, right? And we have exactly the kind of thing here, nicely commented, maybe even by the system. And we can, Mark and I can click. I want the all the occurrences of a verb in the document to start vibrating. Whatever it is we want to try, and we put it in. If it doesn't work, regenerate. We put it in a few times. Maybe it does something different. Maybe it works nothing. Maybe we'll learn a little bit of code. Maybe we say, this is stupid. Can you please help us? Maybe it actually works. Right. So some of to open up some of this amazing functionality. And again, the name AI is so annoying because it's got the word intelligence in it. But in terms of what you're talking about, Alan, in terms of being a transformer or a translator or a thingamajig like that, if we could do that, imagine, I mean, first of all, by the way, for the record, let me pause the video.
This meeting is being recorded.
So funny with the echoes on that particular thing. Right. So here's the thing. Imagine if in a year we as a community can present an XR thing, installable app or website or whatever we decide, or both, that people can point their current academic library to, open up and do the basic interactions. But it has a, you know, like Fabienne, have a look. Like imagine, you know, you hold up your Fabienne hand, and on the side here, you have your controls, right? Because I just love the box thing. Imagine if we have something like that. And then we can do, the simplest one will be, give me an AI summary of the document, because, you know, everybody can do that. But imagine if we can then stretch out, and now we're in Fabienne world. This is real code. It's in space, and we can do this LLM things. It would be absolutely incredible because it is actually potentially useful. Because it's their own data. And the data is just the starting point. And it will be a real thing, backed by a real brand. You know, so going forward with that, after these 2 years, there's no chance that if we actually deliver, which I think we will, we're just going to, you know, go on holiday. You know, that's when the real thing starts. That's when we expect to apply for real funding and do bigger stuffs. Leon, please.
I will keep it short, but this also begs the question to, like, if you want to make it really meaningful, then maybe you should demo or focus on an existing archive, not just let's say a personal demo with like, here's 3 PDFs, look how I can summarize it, but more like, here's the archive of something.
It is based on the user's own PDF archive. That's really, really important. So the idea is that, okay, I want to be one of the Mac developer partners for this, right? So I can imagine sitting down an academic, a student, whatever, saying, please install Reader, it's free. Oh, I got my documents there, now what? Oh, I can do all these things in Reader. Oh, how brilliant. Right, put on your headset. First time you go to this app, Reader in XR, you need to tell us where your documents are, whether it's Dropbox or iCloud or whatever. It depends what we can afford to implement. And then in this XR environment, you have your own documents. The importance of it being your own documents, I think, is absolutely central. You know, if it's with all due respect and love to Ted Nelson, if it's a Ted Nelson corpus of the Queens of England or Kings and Queens of England, it's a novelty. You know, even if it's the massive library or something, it's a novelty. If it's your own stuff, and I'm hoping, I don't know if we can do it the first year, maybe we can do it the first year. if you're allowed to just highlight a few things or take a note or do something, if you can do a small modification to it, not just read it, then it's actually thinking space.
Any thoughts along those lines?
I can connect the last two things, so Leon's and Freud's point, because in a sense that if you want a known corpus, just make sure that your local library is a known corpus. I mean, in the sense that, okay, it's not going to be a massive corpus, but you could still take something. I mean, you know, one of the many things I have in here, for instance, is all 1,800 published items in the 34 years of the Hypertext Conference. That's just a small part of my local corpus. But as I put in the sidebar, I think the other thing we need to do is it's fine to experiment, but we also actually, we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that this actually has to be useful to people doing academic work. If we're just doing funky things in XR, but we're not actually helping people do their academic work in XR, we haven't actually moved the needle as much as we might think. That's not our intent, but it's if we don't make sure that somewhere there is a corner that, look, actually we still have to do all this boring stuff as well, because you know people need to work stuff out. Alan.
I completely agree with that, and I think that outside of or alongside of the Sloan research work, there should be a discussion about best guesses of the jobs to be done, right? So to summarize a couple of them, if I have a corpus of, I don't know, could be small, 10 PDFs, right? And I haven't read them, right? Then am I going to have to read them to understand, you know, to get the information out that I need, right? So that's one area of study, right? Which would be like, right now it's called summarize, but that's hardly been explored, right? If you apply the same thing to all of these YouTube conversations, summarizing a conversation is not sufficient to pull out the parts of the conversations that are useful based on a given context, which is also a difficult problem, because if you did a query for XR, right, the interesting bit may not involve the word XR at all. We know about this. That's a totally different problem than, I know I came across something interesting about Leonardo da Vinci at some point last month. And boy, if I had a rigorous system that chronicled every time that I came across Da Vinci, this would not be a problem, but I'm a lazy human being. So and this is what I did last night. I had a feeling that I was thinking a certain way about Da Vinci, and I backtraced my various sources from Kindle to other things, to even like I keep a running tally of what I'm reading throughout the day. So I went back and I was able to sort of, I finally got something in one of my note in craft where all I said was Calvino da Vinci, and that was it. So I was like, what does that even mean? And then from there, I was able to confirm, oh, I was reading Calvino at that time. Oh, he did talk about Da Vinci. So then I was able to get the book from the library again and find that quote I was looking for, right? That was a laborious process, but the point is that I'd encountered it before. I had created enough of a trailhead to get back to what I wanted. So it was a success in a way, with, you know, without putting all this effort into coding it. That's a different kind of job to be done, right? Either one of those would be useful for academics, but focusing on that, you know, those and the other, you know, like 12 maybe unique problems, and then matching those with what does XR do really well, and then getting lethal about pursuing that, is how you make something that is a compelling demo that catches on. So I agree with you, Mark.
Yeah, I think we all agree. By the way, Rewind for macOS seems to be very good at listening, spying on you, and then giving you summaries.
Yeah, I just, for obvious reasons,
it
feels weird to me.
Yeah, I uninstalled it because I wanted it to be just for meetings, and it took too much space and too many messages. But so Mark says, I've lost context on this. What I meant, Mark, is when you asked for writing down what kind of stuff should be done, That link is meant to be a really basic list of what should be done in this case. The link that I put there, but the thing, and what, a couple of things. First of all, we all need to write articles or web pages or whatever of crazy ideas of what should be done. But as you know, it really surprises me. Just the basics are really complicated. So the example that you gave there, Alan, I would put under, when you open up this thing, this environment that we're talking about, we're in what I currently call a library. May not be the best word for it, right? And we have no idea how the library should appear. So that is an entire research issue in itself. And we may use a default, just a list or something. Of course, we have to put these components together, but we keep that as one research project. So when you then open up a PDF to read it, hopefully that is a different environment to an extent. So then when we're talking about making changes, we're kind of keeping them, to use that phrase, object-oriented in a sense, because I want to be able to have the same set of data and have one day Fabien's library and another day Peter's library. A library, if the data is contained in the objects, Visual Meta style, then it doesn't matter what library viewer you have, the data will remain the same. The song will remain the same, right? So that is why it's so exciting to listen to you talk about those things you just said now, Alan. Because if we do an amazing reading, a simple thing environment, and then having lots of document environments, you can change out any of them at any point you want. You can fiddle with the code for anyone you want.
One of the things I was going to talk about today, we'll have to punt it to another time, is the Mississippi River Basin model, which was a 200-acre replication of the Mississippi River, which humorously in small scale models of rivers, the real thing is called the prototype and the model is called the model. But I bring it up because what I would love in a VR XR space would be something along the lines of, what's my river basin? What is my constant, consistent sediment that I'm interested in, right? And then what are the things that are quickly moving over it and through it? And then how is that landscape changing over time? How is it meandering, right? Where does it lead to tributaries? I don't want necessarily an analogy of a river, but I'd like to go into a space and be like, this that I'm reading is now getting closer to the sediment. It is these parts of what I read.
Alan, we need full sessions on that. That is really, really important to literally step out of the library and go deeper in every single way. Let me just ask you this, first of all of you, to be able to build a system that takes a bunch of documents from your computer and makes them easily accessible in XR is not absolute rocket science, right? Elon Musk could do it, right? Okay, good. Rhetorical question. Second thing is, this reader thing we're talking about, do you think it should be installed on the headset or should it be a web page? Where should it live? Just to nail down a few things there.
I don't know how to answer that question.
So many clever people thinking. So great, you're my LLMs, you're thinking for me.
Photogram, correct. I don't know the constraints of one version of the options, so I'm not qualified to answer.
We're gonna have to pick one. Okay, Leon and Fabien, then, since you're both XR development people, where should it live?
Well,
Leon, you don't agree, do you? Your face says, I'm not sure.
Well, if it's a research project, then you have the luxury to, choose what is the most flexible, which is probably the web. If there's like a research project also always has two goals. Is first goal is to sort of satisfy the person who's paying, and the second one is your own personal goals. And if you are, it's already sort of part of the plan all along to sort of have some kind of Mac sauce or do something in the Mac, then probably you want to go for a native Mac application. So I guess that's it depends a bit on, yeah, let's say the real goals.
Okay, absolutely fair enough. Makes a lot of sense. Now, I'm not thinking about a native app like a Mac app. I'm going to try to do a test one myself just for fun. But the XR code, it can be wrapped in a downloadable app, right? For Meta and whatever. Can it?
That's correct. I have done the same. There is a so Meta has the store, but it also has the App Lab, and you can there's a site where you can basically upload a zip with your web app, and it will basically allow you to download a .apk file, which is an Android binary file, and you can upload that to it sounds a bit complicated, to a website of SideQuest, which is a side loader that's sort of affiliated, and so that is possible, and I have tested that approach and it works.
Okay, because the reason I'm not just immediately agreeing with web is I really think, even though it is a research project, we should think of it as a commercial project in the sense that we take a student, sit them down, they tell us where their PDFs are, spend 5 minutes doing setup. That's fine, obviously. Once that's done, it has to behave as instantly and as conveniently as a native app, but it has to be WebXR because it has to be open. So I want them to say, what I want to hear after the student has, or whatever, it's like, oh my God, I've been reading this document, but now I see it. That kind of happiness, right? Once they're done, they need to be able to take the headset off and say, you know what, I'm going to buy a Quest or whatever. How do I do this again? And we should be able to give them a really brief sentence. It's free on the App Store or something. It has to be so simple, not just the first time they use it themselves, but also when they're sitting stressing on their laptop and they put it on. It should be so instant, because I know one of the key reasons I don't use my headset very often, it takes a long time to get to work.
So I don't want to end on a negative note, but I think, let's say, even a prototype is difficult to build if it's genuinely new. And a product is much harder to build, which is precisely why I don't make product. So if it's like in between both, honestly, I think you should be more scared of not delivering. I don't want to be an asshole, but I think that doesn't sound realistic to me. And I've seen countless projects where it's like, no, we don't really need a prototype. We need like a newly sellable product. And I think basically to make it in a different way, you need to add a couple of zeros to go from this. Because when there is like, let's say the core interaction that is new, that's feasible as a prototype. The core interaction that is, it just works, or everything that is like, oh, it's so simple and the person doesn't have to install anything or whatever, it's easy and whatnot. It's a shit ton of work, which I'm not willing to do, which is why I do prototyping, just because I don't find it interesting. But I'm just saying a product and a prototype, there is like very long runway difference, which means there are a couple of zeros missing. So again, don't want to be negative, don't want to like, because I think there are generally interesting ideas there to explore, but I'm worried for you, not for me, when you start to bridge both prototype to product, because I've seen horror stories before, so I'll be super cautious. And it's basically the number of compromises, and they're going to be compromised not just like, oh, I don't know, I removed the logo or something, but like, oh, I didn't want it to be, I don't know, a .doc, which none of us love, but somehow it's somehow standard. And maybe that's the one compromise that will have to be done, I don't know, to make it quick to test efficiently.
I agree with you, Fabian, which is why the joke, first you do 90% of the programming, then you do the other 90% of the programming, is actually factually true. I absolutely agree. And this is why I'm trying to scope it down to be very, very little. You know, it's basically, you have your document, you can view it in a few ways, maybe do an annotation, that's it. But the actual viewing process has, you know, the text has to be crisp, you have to put it where you want it. So even if it becomes just, you see every single thing next to each other, that's it. So if we develop the library opening thing separately, if that just works, you know, I think we can keep it really small. But here's the problem with you guys. You've thought about this a long time, so your expectations are vast. A new user to be able to read an XR and it's useful and it gives you slightly different affordance, holy moly, they're going to love it. It may end up being just a prototype, and as long as it works, that's okay. I just think we should approach it towards, now there's no money on the line. It's not like we have to make money at the end of this, so it's not commercial in that sense. That takes some of the stress off. But can we together try to work on the how to get the documents into the XR space over the next few weeks? Not necessarily coded, but at least architected a bit.
Yeah, oh, I forgot. Our dear Swedish friend and I have done this with a PDF.js in the past. It's very minimal. It's just basically the title or the first sentence of a PDF, but you get some PDF content in XR. So that, yeah, this I'm not worried about.
Okay, that's good. That's great. And Mark's got all kinds of hands on the air now.
I was going to loop back because we ran past the point, but I was just going to loop back and said, as I imagine, I think you misunderstood my earlier comment. What I was driving at was, for instance, I suspect if you asked everyone in this room what you do with your PDFs, I suspect they'd all do it a slightly different way. So part of the thing is understanding what the kind of things we're doing. Now, the reality is, in the time we've got, what you may need to do is then to take those things and break them down almost into primitives. But part of the thing of doing the outer level of question is, if we don't do that, it's very possible to have a number of primitives that don't actually add up to any of the things we want to do. So that's what I was driving at. I'm not suggesting that there's time to do particularly complicated things, but it's important to make it more than a toy. So, I mean, one simple thing is just being able to see the citation tree within your library of something. Shouldn't be. Yeah, I'm sure it's actually complicated because the metadata is so bad. But in practice, that's the kind of thing that you know, would seem a reasonable thing to ask for. And that to do that, therefore, and I won't try and do it on the fly, will basically boil down to a number of interactions, you know, which what I was referring to as essentially as primitives, probably misusing that term. So a number of affordances, a number of actions, interactions that you would need to do to get to an objective goal. Otherwise, you're just playing.
I agree. So we should have discussions on defining what that is. Fabian, what you were talking about with importing PDFs, did you say basically without the content? Is that what you meant with one or two sentences?
With content, but without layout, let's say. So we can and even like the prototype I did for Demo Day, where you have access to some of your, like a unified file system across devices. You could imagine getting, let's say, the first sentence of the 10 PDF across the different devices there. It wouldn't look like a normal PDF because, again, the layout is missing. It could if it was converted, let's say, to an image. But yeah, then it depends precisely also on what Mark mentioned, namely, like, what is the actual task at hand? And I think being able to go from this, let's say, a space with PDF or even a directory of PDFs to what is, let's say, the target user trying to do would be more helpful in saying what are the compromises that are needed, if any, which probably there will be. Maybe a PDF that becomes an image is enough. Again, it depends on the tasks.
Right. So that's really, really important and core. I see Alan's got something for us, but I just wanted to ask. So for instance, could we say that we decide that when you're reading, you can't do much, they're almost JPEGs, but when you're in the library, we import all the beginning visual meta so that you can do citation mapping. could that be an example of something that's feasible? So that by beginning Visual Meta, I say self-citation plus references, so that we could then see what documents point to what documents. Is that within the scope of reasonableness?
We definitely need to have a very, very clean set. I mean, I know I sound like a worn record, but most stuff I've gone through is broken in all sorts. So the point is, we need to know, as if we work from that, yes, I think it's tractable. Otherwise, I wouldn't even start on the process, because you'll keep tripping over things that aren't really in scope.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, we do need. Oh, I'm also being called downstairs. Okay, let's do it. Maybe some emails during the week about this, but also talk a little bit more next week. But Alan, please, what were you showing us?
Oh, I was just showing you, like, I mean, this is just Google's new thing, Notebook ML, and it's for, right now it's scoped to PDFs and synthesizing them, making sense of them, and then asking questions for a small group of PDFs and making notes about it. So it's
Can you give me a link to that, please?
I
Breakfast.
give you
Are you sure it's breakfast? Is it maybe lunch?
Dinner.
Is it dessert? Oh.
Dinner.
Take a look. Take a look. Oh, I'm coming. Alan is just showing stuff. Okay, go. I'm coming. Yes, Mr. Cakeman.
I'm starving too. It's time to go.
It is time. It is time. Yeah, can you just give me a link to that, Alan, and then we disconnect.
I think I can give you a sign up.
Yeah, I think it's US only. So I think, Alan, you will need next week to do a proper demonstration, because I don't think it's accessible outside of the US.
Oh, okay.
Okay. All right.
All right. I look forward to next week. This is getting very useful. It's good having a specific project to focus our thoughts about, at least some of them. Bye, everyone. Have a spooky week.
Bye-bye.